Man was wrongfully jailed due to a cop's lies and what he does to the judge. Made her cry? The fluorescent lights inside the grocery store flickered faintly overhead as Noah Reed tossed a few last-minute snacks into the basket. Juice boxes, a bag of sour gummies, and his son's favorite barbecue chips. The Saturday game was in just over an hour, and he didn't want to show up empty-handed. He smiled at the cashier, paid with crumpled bills from his back pocket, and exited with the plastic bag swinging from his hand. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. The pavement warmed beneath his boots. He barely made it 20 steps before chaos erupted. "Get on the ground! Hands where I can see them!" Noah's body jolted with the shout. He turned, eyes wide, heart slamming against his ribs. 3 police cruisers screeched to a halt around him, doors flinging open in unison. 6 officers stormed out, weapons drawn, forming a tight circle like lions closing in on prey. What the hell? Noah dropped his groceries as a red laser sight danced across his chest. Before he could finish his sentence, a body slammed into him from behind, driving him hard into the asphalt. The ground tore at his skin. His head hit the pavement with a sickening crack. "Don't move!" a voice barked. A heavy knee crushed into his spine. "What did I do?" Noah gasped, trying to turn his head, dust mixing with the blood on his cheek. "Please, I didn't do anything." But there was no answer, just the cold, mechanical click of handcuffs snapping shut around his wrists. Then he saw him, Detective Alan Monroe. The man stepped forward slowly, methodically, like a villain walking into the final scene of a movie he already knew the ending to. Dressed in a tailored navy blue coat, badge gleaming in the sun, Monroe didn't need to shout. He didn't need to justify. His eyes were devoid of emotion, and his lips curled into a smirk that made Noah's stomach twist. Monroe crouched beside him, sunglasses reflecting Noah's terrified face. "You know what you did," he said with venom-laced calm. "Armed robbery. You picked the wrong day to play gangster." "Robbery? What? No, I just got off work. I was at the garage. I have receipts, time cards. Check the cameras." Monroe's smile grew colder. "Save it for the judge." A crowd had gathered by now. Phones out, faces confused. A mother pulled her child back. A man filming muttered, "This some kind of mistake?" But the scene played on. Noah was yanked to his feet, shirt torn, wrists bound so tight they turned purple. The snacks for his son lay scattered behind him, crushed under the boot of one officer who didn't seem to notice or care. He searched the faces around him. No one stepped forward. No one said a word. Every step he took toward the squad car felt like being dragged deeper into a nightmare. "Please, just let me call my son. Let me call my kid. He's waiting. Please." But no one listened. The back door of the cruiser slammed shut, sealing Noah behind steel and tinted glass, as if the truth didn't matter anymore. Inside the vehicle, the air was stifling. Noah's chest heaved as panic gripped him. Through the window, he saw Monroe laughing quietly with another officer, like this was just another routine bust. Like Noah's life wasn't unraveling at the seams. This can't be real, he told himself, but the handcuffs on his wrists said otherwise. They didn't ask him for an alibi. They didn't let him speak. There was no Miranda warning, no courtesy, no dignity, just brute force and humiliation. He wasn't a suspect. He was a target, prejudged, profiled, and now prosecuted before a single fact had been reviewed. The courtroom air was thick and suffocating, a mix of stale sweat and nervous anticipation hanging heavily beneath the ornate chandeliers that belonged to a different era. A stark irony, considering justice today seemed as outdated as the fixtures themselves. Noah Reed sat rigidly at the defendant's table, his heart hammering violently against his rib cage as he struggled to process how his life had descended into this surreal nightmare. Beside him, his public defender, Andrew Coulson, fumbled anxiously through scattered documents, eyes bloodshot from too many sleepless nights and too little preparation. It was painfully clear. Coulson was juggling dozens of other cases, and Noah was merely a file number, another forgotten face lost in a system stretched to its breaking point. Judge Laura Whitaker presided from above, her expression detached and indifferent, eyes glazed over from years of routine. She peered over thin glasses perched low on her nose, occasionally flipping pages from the file in front of her without ever truly looking at Noah. To her, he was just another case, another checkbox in her busy day. Noah searched her face desperately for empathy, for some faint trace of curiosity or fairness, but found nothing but boredom masked as impartiality. The heavy doors at the back creaked open, the sound reverberating ominously throughout the courtroom, and Detective Alan Monroe strode confidently toward the witness stand. His polished shoes clicked sharply against the marble floor, echoing with each step, a cruel metronome counting down Noah's chance for freedom. Monroe wore his uniform impeccably, badge glinting mockingly beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. A slight, sinister smirk pulled at the corners of his mouth, betraying his satisfaction at a performance carefully staged to perfection. Monroe swore an oath to tell the truth, but the solemnity of that promise was betrayed by the ease with which he leaned back comfortably in his seat, his demeanor cool and arrogant. "Detective Monroe," the prosecutor began, his voice projecting with theatrical conviction, "could you describe the evidence that ties the defendant, Noah Reed, to this violent armed robbery?" Monroe's eyes locked onto Noah's briefly, a cold glint shimmering beneath his calculated facade. He spoke calmly, deliberately, delivering each word as though rehearsed 1,000 times. "We recovered Mr. Reed's fingerprints clearly embedded on the weapon discarded near the crime scene. Forensics confirmed it was an exact match," Monroe said, voice dripping false sincerity. "Additionally, we have a witness who positively identified Mr. Reed fleeing from the scene, weapon still in hand." At these words, Noah's pulse quickened with shock and rage, eyes widening in disbelief. He knew this was impossible. He had never touched a gun in his life. He instinctively glanced toward Colson, desperate for intervention, for any hint of outrage. But his lawyer was fumbling through a stack of unrelated paperwork, lost in his own confusion. "Objection!" Colson finally sputtered, standing abruptly and scattering sheets across the table. "Your Honor, this evidence was never properly disclosed." Judge Whitaker raised a disinterested hand, silencing him immediately. "Counselor, if there was an issue with evidence disclosure, it should have been addressed during pretrial motions. Sit down." Defeated, Colson sank back into his chair, his protest weak, dying in his throat. Noah's stomach churned. He was completely alone in this room, full of strangers who had already made up their minds. Noah desperately scanned the jury, 12 blank faces looking down at their notepads, scribbling occasional notes, disconnected from the human being whose life now balanced precariously in their hands. Panic rose like bile in his throat. He needed to speak, to scream out the truth. He couldn't just sit quietly as lies swallowed him whole. "Your Honor," Noah blurted, voice breaking in desperation. "Please, check the cameras from my workplace. I was nowhere near the robbery. I was working overtime at the garage that night. People saw me." Whitaker finally glanced up, her cold eyes narrowing slightly, as if annoyed by this sudden interruption. "Mr. Reed, control yourself. Your attorney will speak for you." But Noah shook his head vehemently, refusing to yield. "He hasn't spoken for me at all. No one has. I'm innocent, and you're sentencing me right now without even trying to see the truth." Judge Whitaker banged her gavel sharply, the harsh echo silencing Noah's desperate pleas. "Enough! Another outburst, and I will hold you in contempt." Tears of rage and helplessness burned Noah's eyes. His breath came in shallow gasps, heart hammering in blind panic as the prosecutor rose again, calmly asking the jury to deliver justice, to condemn a dangerous criminal. Noah's body trembled, fingers gripping the edge of the table until knuckles turned white. Colson sat silently beside him, head bowed in resignation. Minutes blurred together as the jury filed silently from the courtroom. Seconds stretched into eternity as Noah waited, hoping that someone, anyone, would realize this catastrophic mistake. But when they returned mere moments later, faces unchanged, Noah felt the crushing weight of inevitability. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Whitaker asked flatly, voice devoid of emotion. "We have, Your Honor," the jury foreperson replied, avoiding eye contact with Noah. "We find the defendant, Noah Reed, guilty of armed robbery." The courtroom erupted into murmurs. Noah's chest heaved as panic overcame him, eyes wild with shock and disbelief. He bolted upright, chains rattling violently against his wrists. "No! No, this isn't right!" he shouted, voice raw with anguish. "I didn't do this! I'm innocent! Why won't anyone listen?" Judge Whitaker pounded the gavel again, mercilessly silencing his cries. "Mr. Reed, based on the jury's verdict, I hereby sentence you to 15 years imprisonment, effective immediately." "No!" Noah's scream was primal, a guttural cry ripped from the depths of his being. "I'm innocent! I did nothing wrong!" Guards rushed forward, gripping him tightly by the arms, dragging him away from the courtroom, away from justice, away from his life. Noah fought wildly, eyes pleading desperately with anyone who dared to look at him. But all he saw was Monroe's smug, satisfied smile and Whitaker's indifferent eyes returning to the next case file. The heavy steel doors slammed shut behind Noah Reed with a bone-chilling echo that seemed to reverberate endlessly down the dimly lit corridor. The air was heavy with the scent of disinfectant mixed with sweat and desperation, thick enough to choke the courage out of anyone entering for the first time. The guard's rough grip dug painfully into Noah's shoulder, guiding him aggressively through the cold concrete maze of the state prison, a place that felt as close to hell as any living soul could endure. As Noah passed through each barred gate, the inmates' voices grew louder, jeering and laughing, eyes peering from shadowed cells like wolves sizing up fresh prey. Each step Noah took amplified his sense of vulnerability, a rawness that crawled under his skin, settling deep into his bones. He was stripped of everything, his family, his dignity, his freedom, and thrust into a reality where innocence meant nothing, and survival was the only language spoken. Arriving at his cell, the guard shoved him roughly inside, the iron bars crashing closed behind him with deafening finality. Noah stood in silence, his heart pounding furiously, staring blankly at the small concrete cube that was now his entire world. The walls were covered in faded graffiti, etched words and symbols, reminders of those who had come and gone, many broken by a system designed to punish rather than redeem. From the shadows emerged his new reality. Within hours, Noah became the target, a fresh face to torment, an easy victim for hardened men desperate to prove their dominance. They cornered him in the exercise yard, their faces hardened by years of violence, their eyes devoid of empathy. Their fists landed mercilessly, bruising his flesh and cracking ribs, laughter punctuating each cruel blow. Noah curled defensively into himself, tasting his own blood, the metallic tang mixing with dirt and humiliation. "Welcome home, pretty boy," one prisoner mocked, kicking dust onto Noah's battered body as guards deliberately turned their heads, indifferent to his suffering. Days blurred into nights filled with sleepless torment. Isolation quickly became Noah's cruelest companion. His meals were often stolen or tossed onto the filthy ground. His attempts at conversation met with silence or sneering hostility. Guards dismissed his protest without a glance, branding him as just another lying inmate claiming innocence. He was invisible, just another meaningless number in an endless sea of forgotten souls. Each night, the darkness pressed closer, suffocating him. His spirit grew weaker under the constant assault. Yet somewhere deep inside Noah, beneath layers of agony and despair, a tiny flame stubbornly burned, a flicker of defiance refusing to die. One sleepless night, consumed by rage and desperation, Noah took a jagged scrap of metal he found tucked beneath his bunk and pressed it against the grimy concrete wall of his cell. With trembling fingers, he etched his truth into the stone, each scratch fierce and determined. "I am Noah. I am not a number. I am innocent." He stepped back, breathing heavily, gazing at the words now permanently carved into his cell. Words that became his silent rebellion, his only lifeline to sanity. It was a declaration against a world determined to erase him, a whisper of truth screamed into deafening silence. Days later, as Noah sat hunched in the prison library, a dreary space filled with battered books and despairing men, he sensed someone approaching. He braced instinctively, shoulders tensing, expecting another assault. Instead, an older man stood quietly before him, silver hair framing a weathered face etched deeply by hardship. dark eyes sharp yet gentle, studying Noah closely. Noah had noticed him before. The other prisoners called him Cortez, spoke about him with wary respect. Luis Cortez had spent decades behind these walls, rumored to be a former lawyer wrongfully imprisoned, yet unbroken in spirit. "You're the new guy," Luis finally said, his voice calm but carrying authority. Noah nodded cautiously, unsure what to expect next. Luis sat slowly across from him, leaning in with intensity. "I've been watching you, kid. They're trying to destroy you, grind you into dust. Don't let them." Noah met his gaze, pain and bitterness flashing across his face. "What choice do I have? They took everything. No one believes me. Justice doesn't exist here." Luis's eyes flared passionately, voice dropping to a forceful whisper. "That's exactly what they want you to believe. But listen closely. Justice only dies when you let them convince you it no longer exists. Don't hand them your soul." "How can I fight when the truth doesn't matter?" Noah replied bitterly, fists clenched with frustration. "They framed me. They lied. Nobody checked the cameras. Nobody cares." Luis's jaw tightened, eyes burning brighter, his tone sharp and commanding. "Then make them care. Fight back smarter. You're a victim of their lies, so become a master of their laws. Knowledge, Noah, is your greatest weapon. They chained your body, but your mind remains free. Use it." Noah stared at Luis, feeling the older man's words sink deeply into him, slowly igniting something new. Purpose. Luis recognized the shift in Noah's expression and pressed on urgently. "I was where you are now. Angry, broken, hopeless. They framed me too, stole my life away. But I refused to die quietly. I learned every law, studied every loophole, filed appeals until the system had to hear me. I fight every day, Noah, because silence is acceptance, and acceptance means defeat." Noah swallowed hard, feeling emotions he'd long buried rising fiercely to the surface. Luis placed a firm hand on Noah's shoulder, leaning in closer, his voice filled with unshakable conviction. "You're innocent, Noah, but innocence alone won't save you. Arm yourself with the same laws they twisted against you. Learn every word, every weakness in their system. Challenge them with facts, not just anger. That's how you win." For the first time since entering prison, Noah felt a faint spark ignite fully into flame within him. He met Luis's gaze, newfound determination spreading through his battered body. Under the sterile glare of the prison library's flickering lights, Noah Reed hunched silently over a tattered law textbook, pages yellowed and stained from years of desperate hands searching for answers. The room was stifling, air heavy with dust, stale sweat, and fading dreams, a place where men clung desperately to fragile hopes. His fingers traced each sentence, eyes burning from relentless hours spent poring over dense legal jargon. Noah's face was etched deeply with exhaustion, the shadow of stubble darkening his jawline, and gray hairs prematurely streaking through his temples, silent reminders of each day stolen from his life. Beside him lay stacks of carefully written papers, countless appeals painstakingly crafted, his heart and truth embedded within every word. Yet each submission had met the same cold, impersonal fate: swift rejection, marked with ink-red stamps, and short, cruel denials that haunted his sleepless nights. He could still recall each refusal with excruciating clarity, each dismissal echoing the unjust verdict that first stole his freedom. Every denial pushed him deeper into despair, but Noah refused to surrender, even as the weight of injustice pressed ever heavier upon him. Through the barred windows above, he could glimpse fragments of sky, twilight casting purple bruises across clouds drifting slowly toward darkness, an endless metaphor for his struggle. Time had become a ruthless enemy, stretching endlessly ahead, stealing years Noah knew he would never reclaim. But even as his weary body begged him to rest, his mind refused, driving him forward with desperate intensity. He flipped pages furiously, underlining precedents and annotating margins, his pulse quickening each time he stumbled upon a promising detail, only to have his hopes dashed moments later by complex legal technicalities that mocked him from the printed pages. Across the room, Guards exchanged indifferent glances, chuckling occasionally at Noah's relentless efforts, murmuring quietly among themselves, indifferent to the anguish of the prisoner before them. They had seen hundreds like him, men crushed beneath a system rigged against them, men who wasted their days chasing justice that never arrived. To them, Noah's persistence was merely a spectacle, another sad story destined to end in failure. As the evening bell rang sharply, signaling the end of library hours, Noah clenched his fists, frustration coiled tightly within him. Reluctantly, he gathered his papers, carefully stacking each precious document, each rejected appeal a silent accusation against the very concept of justice. Walking slowly back to his cell, his footsteps echoed heavily along dimly lit corridors lined with cold steel doors, each step amplifying the harsh reality that he was trapped. Buried alive beneath lies he couldn't disprove, in truths no one cared enough to hear. Back in his cell, he collapsed onto the thin, worn mattress, its springs creaking beneath him like mocking whispers of defeat. From beneath the pillow, he withdrew a small, wrinkled photograph, his family smiling joyously in better times. His heart twisted painfully as he stared at his wife, Sarah, her eyes bright with laughter that now felt impossibly distant. He vividly recalled the day he received her final letter, cold and brief, informing him she'd moved on, unable to endure the whispers, judgment, and shame of being married to a man branded criminal. Her absence hollowed him, a wound that refused to heal, but the loss that cut deepest was that of his son, Marcus. Noah had clung desperately to the hope of staying in his son's life, writing countless letters filled with love, reassurance, and promises he could no longer keep. But Marcus had grown distant, his replies increasingly rare, eventually ceasing entirely. Noah remembered the unbearable ache of the day his last letter returned unopened, stamped cruelly, "Return to sender." It was as if the world itself had turned its back, leaving Noah utterly abandoned, left only with echoes of a life he'd once treasured. Alone, enveloped in shadows cast by the dim glow of the distant corridor lights, Noah stared upward at the cracked ceiling, despair threatening to drown him. The oppressive silence pressed upon his chest, each breath feeling like a heavy stone crushing his lungs. The reality of his isolation gnawed relentlessly, whispering cruel truths, that the world had forgotten him, that no one cared enough to uncover the injustice he'd suffered. Yet within that crushing darkness, Noah felt something shift, a stubborn, defiant spark refusing to extinguish. His heartbeat quickened, fist clenching as Luis Cortez's words reverberated fiercely within him. Don't let them destroy your spirit. Fight back smarter. Use their own laws against them. In the black silence of night, Noah whispered fiercely into the emptiness surrounding him, his voice barely audible but resolute, each word a quiet revolution. If the world forgets me, I cannot forget myself. The relentless grind of prison life had begun to blur Noah's days into a monotonous cycle of despair. His cell felt tighter every night, the walls pressing in mercilessly, suffocating his dwindling sense of hope. It had been years, long, punishing years, since he'd felt sunlight that wasn't fractured by bars, or heard voices that didn't ring with hostility. Rejections from countless appeals littered his small, cramped cell, each denial stamping harder on his dignity, each no etched permanently into the fabric of his resilience. Noah fought to cling desperately to the faint threads of optimism still alive within him, yet it was a battle he felt dangerously close to losing. Then one afternoon, amidst the drab silence, came a rare interruption, the metallic clank of the mail slot snapping open. Noah turned sharply, startled. Mail for him had become increasingly rare, his family having long abandoned contact. With caution he approached, expecting disappointment. Instead, his fingers trembled as they brushed over the unfamiliar handwriting on the crisp official envelope. With urgency, he tore it open, eyes darting over the neatly typed lines inside. Mr. Noah Reed, my name is Camille Dunn. I am an attorney specializing in wrongful convictions, and I have personally reviewed your case. I firmly believe you've suffered a grave miscarriage of justice. I intend to prove your innocence. Please do not lose hope. Your fight is no longer yours alone. Noah's knees buckled beneath him, Emotion gripped his chest fiercely, threatening to consume him whole. For the first time in years, someone saw him, not as inmate number 45,522, but as Noah Reed, innocent and unjustly imprisoned. This brief letter reignited a flame inside him, piercing the darkness of hopelessness. Outside those prison walls, Camille Dunn moved swiftly through crowded city streets with determined urgency. Young, fiercely intelligent, and relentlessly passionate, she was exactly the kind of attorney that a system entrenched in corruption feared most. Her fierce amber eyes burned with righteous determination, her slender frame exuding confidence. Camille was not merely pursuing a case. This was a crusade for truth, an opportunity to dismantle a twisted injustice hiding in plain sight. Her first breakthrough came one rainy afternoon, deep inside the cluttered archives of a gas station security footage. As rain tapped rhythmically against the window panes, Camille meticulously sifted through hours of grainy black and white videos. Her pulse quickened when she spotted Noah's unmistakable silhouette, clear as day, at a gas pump miles from the alleged robbery, his face fully visible beneath the flickering neon signs. The timestamp, bold and irrefutable, matched exactly the moment of the crime. Camille's breath quickened, adrenaline surging. This was undeniable proof, evidence deliberately overlooked, proof that could tear apart Detective Monroe's entire fabricated narrative. But exposing the truth was far from simple. Camille soon discovered that confronting the system head-on meant wading into a ruthless battlefield of resistance. Her first encounter came swiftly, fierce and without warning, during a heated meeting with the district prosecutor's office. Senior prosecutor James Ellis sat arrogantly behind his polished mahogany desk, eyes narrowed with skepticism, his tone patronizing as he dismissed Camille's new evidence. "Ms. Dunn, this case is settled," he drawled coldly. "Your so-called evidence is meaningless. Noah Reed was convicted by a jury. It's over." Camille rose slowly, meeting his eyes unwaveringly. "Respectfully, Mr. Ellis, it's not over until justice is served. If you're unwilling to cooperate, I'll find someone who will." Ellis's expression hardened dangerously, his voice dripping with contempt. "Tread carefully, Ms. Dunn. People have a way of getting burned when they challenge the wrong authorities." Camille's response was icy calm, her resolve undeterred. "Then prepare to feel the heat." Determined, she turned next to the police department, demanding access to Noah's arrest records and Detective Monroe's prior case files. Doors slammed shut in her face, metaphorically and literally, files mysteriously missing, evidence suddenly destroyed. The more Camille pushed, the tighter ranks closed around Monroe, a protective shield of complicity blocking her at every step. The struggle intensified as Camille confronted Detective Monroe himself. One evening, beneath the harsh, fluorescent lighting of the police precinct's hallway, Camille approached him directly. Monroe stood arrogantly, arms folded across his chest, uniform impeccable, a small, sinister smile tugging at his lips. "Ms. Dunn," Monroe began coolly, eyes narrowing, "you're wasting your time. Noah Reed's exactly where he belongs." Camille stepped forward, refusing to back down, her eyes flashing with controlled fury. "I have video proof that says otherwise, Detective. How many innocent lives have you ruined for your own convenience?" Monroe's smirk faltered momentarily, revealing a crack of insecurity beneath his polished facade. His voice hardened, eyes glinting dangerously. "You're playing a dangerous game." "Justice is no game," Camille fired back. "I'll expose every lie, every piece of evidence you manufactured. Count on it." She felt his glare burn into her back as she walked away, knowing this was a declaration of war. Monroe would not go down without a fight, but neither would she. Days turned to weeks, and every attempt to access critical files was met with calculated obstruction. Camille navigated an intricate maze of bureaucracy designed specifically to crush people like her, those daring to threaten entrenched power. Her small, modest office became a fortress of paperwork, each document a weapon in her relentless battle for truth. But Camille refused to yield, delving deeper into Monroe's past, meticulously piecing together fragments of sinister patterns. Long nights blurred into dawns, her desk illuminated by the pale glow of her laptop screen as she dug tirelessly through archived case files, testimonies, and hidden internal reports. Slowly, a shocking pattern emerged. A tangled web of false arrests, coerced confessions, fabricated evidence, and disturbingly similar cases of innocent individuals unjustly imprisoned by Monroe's ruthless tactics. Her pulse thundered with urgency. This wasn't merely about Noah anymore. It was about tearing down a system that protected dangerous men behind badges. Her decisive breakthrough came late one stormy evening, buried within old police misconduct records. Lightning flashed outside her window, illuminating Camille's determined face as she uncovered Monroe's buried disciplinary file, hidden intentionally deep within archives, untouched for years. Her eyes widened with shock and anger as she read through detailed accusations previously swept under the rug. Multiple witnesses pressured into false testimonies, planted evidence in several high-profile cases, even documented confessions coerced through intimidation and threats. Monroe wasn't simply a rogue detective. He was an unchecked predator in uniform. Hands shaking, Camille understood clearly now why every attempt to reveal the truth had been systematically blocked. Monroe's corruption reached higher, protected by powerful allies eager to maintain the illusion of an effective police force. But Camille had found the cracks in the fortress, vulnerabilities in their carefully constructed lies. She possessed the ammunition to blow the conspiracy wide open, and she intended to use it. Summoning every ounce of courage, Camille arranged a private meeting with Judge Laura Whitaker herself, determined to present the shocking revelations. Whitaker sat rigidly in her chambers, eyes skeptical as Camille laid forth meticulously gathered evidence. Security footage proving Noah's innocence, detailed records of Monroe's repeated misconduct, and proof that the prosecution and police actively suppressed critical information. Yet even as Whitaker reviewed the explosive evidence, her expression remained guarded, betraying no emotion. Camille's heart sank as she sensed the familiar stonewalling about to unfold. "Ms. Dunn," Whitaker said finally, tone measured and cautious, "you're making extraordinary accusations against respected officials, without conclusive proof." "I have conclusive proof," Camille interrupted boldly, desperation edged in her voice. "It's right here. Monroe destroyed lives, fabricated evidence, imprisoned innocent people. Noah Reed among them. If you ignore this, you become part of the injustice." Whitaker's eyes hardened, visibly shaken but defensive. "Be very careful with accusations, counselor. The legal system functions on trust and stability." Camille leaned forward urgently, her voice steady but fierce. "It functions on truth and justice first, and right now it's failing catastrophically. You have a choice, Judge Whitaker. Uphold corruption or uphold justice." A tense silence filled the chamber. Whitaker hesitated, eyes flickering between caution and doubt. Finally, the judge spoke softly, regret heavy in her voice. "Even if you're right, you're challenging an entire system. Prepare yourself for consequences." Camille stood defiantly, unwavering. "I'm prepared for everything. Noah Reed deserves justice, and so does every victim Monroe ever harmed. I won't rest until this is exposed." Stepping out into the stormy night, Camille felt determination surge powerfully through her veins. The battle had escalated dramatically, but she refused to back down. Noah's freedom and the integrity of justice itself depended on her courage. She had already shaken the very foundations of their corrupt fortress, and Camille Dunn had only just begun her fight. The fight for justice is just beginning. More shocking twists are ahead. Don't miss a moment. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay with us. Thank you for standing for truth and justice. Where are you watching from? Let us know. The courtroom was packed tight, air thick with tension and anticipation, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Sunlight streamed sharply through towering windows, casting stark lines of brightness and shadow across rows of faces turned eagerly toward the bench. Noah sat stiffly beside Camille Dunn, his fingers gripping the table's edge, knuckles white with suppressed anxiety. After years of fighting to reclaim his freedom, the day had finally come. The system had reluctantly conceded to reopening his case. At the opposite table sat Detective Alan Monroe, his once proud posture diminished by the weight of sudden vulnerability. No longer the confident predator, Monroe shifted uneasily in his chair, eyes darting cautiously around the room, sensing for the first time what it felt like to be cornered. His jaw clenched, betraying his thinly veiled agitation, a subtle sheen of sweat glistening across his brow. Judge Laura Whitaker entered silently, her expression solemn and unreadable, robes billowing as she settled behind the high wooden bench. Her eyes briefly locked onto Noah, then flicked toward Monroe, revealing nothing. The courtroom quieted instantly, an electric silence punctuated only by nervous coughs and shifting feet. "Counselor Dunn," Judge Whitaker addressed clearly, her voice echoing sharply. "You requested this hearing to present newly discovered evidence. You may proceed." Camille rose confidently, her slender frame radiating a fierce determination. She stepped forward, positioning herself directly before Monroe, her eyes coldly locking onto his. Monroe visibly tensed, sensing the impending storm about to descend upon him. "Detective Monroe," Camille began sharply, her voice echoing with quiet intensity. "When you originally testified, you swore Noah Reed was unmistakably identified, fleeing the scene of an armed robbery at precisely 9:15 p.m. Is this correct?" Monroe shifted awkwardly. "Yes," he muttered reluctantly. Camille's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You also presented fingerprints from a discarded weapon, claiming absolute certainty they belonged to Mr. Reed, correct?" "That's right," Monroe snapped defensively, yet his voice lacked the former strength. Camille advanced methodically, each step forward tightening the pressure. "Then perhaps you can explain something peculiar. I have security footage from a gas station exactly 12 miles from the robbery scene. Footage that places Mr. Reed filling his vehicle at precisely 9:14 p.m., just seconds before the crime occurred across town. Detective, could you please tell the court how Mr. Reed managed this astonishing feat?" The courtroom erupted into startled murmurs, heads swiveling rapidly toward Monroe, whose face had drained of color. He stammered, a wave of panic flickering in his eyes. I can't comment on that." "No, Detective," Camille pressed relentlessly, voice like a blade slicing through his defenses. "You will comment, because this footage was available at the time of the original trial. Did you knowingly ignore evidence proving Noah Reed's innocence?" Monroe swallowed hard, eyes darting anxiously toward Judge Whitaker, then quickly away. His breath quickened, hands trembling visibly upon the table. I conducted the investigation according to protocol," he muttered weakly. Camille's voice hardened, sharp and unforgiving. "Protocol doesn't include falsifying evidence and coercing witnesses, Detective Monroe." She motioned swiftly, signaling the clerk. Moments later, the grainy security footage flickered vividly onto a large screen beside the judge's bench. Gasps rippled through the gallery as all eyes fixed upon the unmistakable figure of Noah Reed, clearly visible beneath glaring station lights, calmly pumping gas at precisely the moment Monroe swore he was committing a violent crime miles away. Noah stared, heart hammering violently. He felt vindicated yet profoundly angered at the undeniable proof of injustice he'd suffered. Each grainy pixel screamed a truth long ignored, a life wrongly imprisoned. All eyes were on Detective Alan Monroe, who now sat hunched on the witness stand like a man being slowly devoured by his own lies. The once confident officer, whose word had once been enough to condemn Noah Reed to prison, now looked like a shadow of the figure he'd projected for years. His shoulders slumped, his crisp uniform wrinkled, his palms visibly sweating as they clenched the wooden railing. The pressure had been mounting for days. Camille Dunn had peeled away at his testimony like layers of rotting wallpaper, exposing each carefully buried lie beneath. Every new piece of evidence, every contradiction, had tightened the noose around Monroe's narrative, unraveling a story he had told so many times he might have once believed it himself. But now, under oath and under fire, his story was beginning to crack. Judge Whitaker watched silently from the bench, her sharp eyes never leaving Monroe. The jury, once passive and neutral, now leaned forward collectively, their faces alert with suspicion and anticipation. Even Prosecutor Ellis, who had fought to preserve Monroe's credibility, sat stiffly in his chair, jaw locked, unable to disguise his growing discomfort. Camille stood just a few feet from Monroe, her expression unreadable, but her presence fierce. She held a folder of damning documents in one hand and Noah's life in the other. Her voice was calm, but it struck with surgical precision. "Detective Monroe," she said, taking a slow step forward, "you told this court that Noah Reed was positively identified at the scene, that his fingerprints were recovered from the weapon, that he matched the description given by an eyewitness. And yet, you've now been confronted with irrefutable proof that he was 12 miles away at the time of the crime. Can you explain the discrepancy?" Monroe's jaw flexed. He cleared his throat, but no sound came. His eyes darted around the room, searching for support, for an ally, for an exit. He found none. Camille's voice grew firmer. "Did you falsify evidence, detective? Were those fingerprints planted? Was the eyewitness statement fabricated?" Monroe's breathing quickened. His fingers gripped the wood so tightly his knuckles went white. His lips opened, then closed again, his mind struggling to find footing on ground that had long since vanished beneath him. He began, voice low and uncertain, barely above a whisper. "I followed procedure. I did what I had to do." Camille seized on the hesitation. "Did what you had to do," she repeated. "What exactly does that mean, detective? Did you bend the truth? Fabricate it? Were you under pressure to close the case regardless of the truth?" A beat of silence followed. Then two. Monroe's eyes glistened as if he were staring down the barrel of his own conscience. He opened his mouth, and for the first time his voice cracked with something raw and unfamiliar. "Guilt. I didn't pick him out of spite," he said slowly, hoarsely. "It wasn't personal. We needed a suspect. There was pressure to solve it fast. Real pressure. The brass wanted results." The courtroom shifted uncomfortably, as if it had just exhaled all at once. "And Noah Reed," Camille said softly but piercingly, "just happened to fit?" Monroe nodded weakly, almost imperceptibly. "He looked like the guy. He was in the area before. His record, he had none, but he matched the description loosely. That was enough for them. Enough for me. We were told," his voice faltered, "we were told to close the case. Quickly. I gave them what they wanted." "Who's them?" Camille demanded. "Who gave you those orders?" Monroe hesitated, the weight of his decision crushing him. He lowered his head. "I can't say." Camille took a breath, steadying the growing fury in her chest. "You sent an innocent man to prison for 15 years because someone told you to wrap the case up fast?" Monroe's voice broke. "Yes." The words struck the room like a thunderclap. Gasps echoed around the chamber. A woman in the gallery audibly choked back a sob. A juror dropped his pen. The sound of shifting bodies, whispered curses, and disbelief filled the air, like a wave crashing through the courtroom. Noah sat frozen, as if the weight of the confession had momentarily stopped time. His heart thundered in his ears. His mouth was dry. After all these years of screaming into the void, of unanswered appeals, of isolation and rejection. Finally, the truth had been spoken aloud, in public, under oath. Judge Whitaker banged her gavel once, but even she seemed rattled, her stern face paling at the implication of what had just been said. "Order in the courtroom," she managed to say, though her voice faltered beneath the gravity of what Monroe had confessed. Camille stared at Monroe, her hands clenched at her sides. "Do you understand what you've done?" she asked, her voice quieter now, almost pained. "You didn't just ruin one man's life. You destroyed a family. You shattered faith in the very system you swore to uphold." Monroe's eyes welled. "I didn't know it would go this far. I needed to make the case go away." Noah stood slowly, unable to remain seated a moment longer. His voice rang out across the courtroom, steady but brimming with fury and sorrow. "You didn't just need a name, Monroe. You needed a scapegoat. And I was black, poor, alone. I was easy." The silence that followed was deafening. Camille turned toward the judge. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "in light of this confession, I respectfully demand that Mr. Reed's conviction be vacated immediately, and that a formal investigation into Detective Monroe and the department's practices be opened without delay." The courtroom had never been so silent. Judge Laura Whitaker sat frozen on the bench, the polished wood of her gavel untouched by her hand, her breathing shallow. The confession from Detective Monroe still echoed in the room like the lingering aftershock of an explosion. Every eye was on her. Jury, gallery, attorneys, officers, waiting for her to speak, waiting for the next sound that would either set a man free or shatter what little remained of his spirit. Her fingers trembled as they gripped the arms of her chair. She looked at Noah Reed. There he stood, tall but worn by years of incarceration, his eyes dark pools of pain, survival, and something else, endurance. His back was straight, his jaw locked, but his entire being seemed suspended in that fragile moment between life sentences, one literal, the other spiritual. Judge Whitaker's lips parted, and for a second no words came. Her eyes shimmered. She blinked rapidly, but the tears refused to retreat. She cleared her throat, voice cracking under the weight of her own conscience. This court has heard confessions, reviewed irrefutable evidence, and witnessed the unraveling of a narrative built on lies, corruption, and prejudice. Her voice broke, tears slipping down her cheeks. Mr. Noah Reed, the justice system failed you in every way that matters. You were accused without cause, convicted without proof, imprisoned without mercy. The room held its collective breath. She placed her hand over her heart. I can never return what was taken from you. No court can. But I can, here and now, speak the truth this court denied you for over a decade. She rose from the bench. Noah Reed, you are innocent. You are a free man. She banged the gavel once, sharp, loud, final. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, sobs, cries of disbelief and relief filled the space. Reporters dashed toward the exits to file stories. Lawyers leaned into each other in hushed disbelief. Even the bailiff stood stunned, unsure whether to maintain order or let the moment breathe. But Noah didn't move. His legs were locked, his mind refusing to accept what his ears had heard. Camille Dunn rose from her chair beside him and whispered, Noah, it's over. You're free. He turned to her, lips parting slightly, a man slowly waking from a nightmare so long and so cruel it had begun to feel like life itself. His knees buckled for just a second. Camille caught his arm. Noah exhaled, long, shaky, like a man taking his first real breath in over a decade. Then he walked out of the courtroom. Each step down the marbled hallway was a march back toward his stolen life. Reporters shouted his name, cameras flashed, strangers applauded, but their noise was nothing compared to the thunder in his chest. The double doors at the end of the corridor loomed large, doors that once swallowed him whole, now ready to spit him back into the world. The sun was blinding as he stepped outside. The prison gates had closed behind him for the last time that morning, and now they opened again, not to a cell, but to freedom. Noah stepped out in silence. The air tasted different, crisp, real. For a long moment, he just stood there on the concrete steps, the sky above him possibly wide. The breeze moved across his face gently, like a lover he hadn't touched in years. He closed his eyes, listening to the sound of birds, distant traffic, laughter, all the small noises that prison walls had stolen from him. And then he heard it, a single word. Dad. Noah froze. His heart stopped mid-beat. He turned slowly. There, just beyond the courthouse crowd, stood a young man, tall, slender, dressed in a blue hoodie and jeans, his hands shaking, eyes rimmed with unshed tears. It was Marcus. No longer the boy Noah remembered, but not yet a man hardened by the world. There was something fragile in his posture, something hesitant in the way he stood, like he was afraid this reunion might shatter the both of them. Noah's lips trembled. Marcus! His son nodded, stepping forward, voice cracking. I'm sorry I didn't write. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to face you. Noah walked toward him, slowly at first, then faster, his breath catching in his throat. They met halfway. Marcus threw his arms around his father. It was not the embrace of a child and a parent. It was the embrace of two souls stitched back together after years of silence, misunderstanding, and unimaginable pain. Noah clutched his son like a lifeline, his body shaking with sobs he hadn't allowed himself to cry in prison. The tears came freely, crashing over him like a storm long overdue. He pressed his forehead against Marcus's, whispering, "You're here. You're here." "I never stopped thinking about you," Marcus whispered back. "Not once." On the steps of a courthouse, once complicit in his undoing, Noah Reed held his son in the golden light of afternoon, and for the first time in more than a decade, felt the world beginning to right itself. He wasn't just free, he was whole again. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference. Though Noah had finally stepped into the light of freedom, true justice would not be complete until the man who orchestrated his downfall was held accountable in the very courtroom where his lies once reigned supreme. The courtroom was full once again, but this time, the man in the defendant's chair wasn't Noah Reed. It was Alan Monroe. Gone was the crisp uniform, the smug expression, the commanding presence that once silenced rooms with a glance. He now sat in an orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed, shoulders hunched, a ghost of the powerful detective he used to be. His hair, once meticulously combed, was disheveled. His eyes, once sharp and calculating, now darted with the nervous desperation of a man cornered by the truth he could no longer outrun. Justice had returned for a reckoning. Judge Laura Whitaker, the very woman who once accepted Monroe's lies without question, now presided with a renewed fire in her gaze. The irony wasn't lost on the courtroom. She had once been complicit, blind to the rot that Monroe spread. But now she would be the one to pass the final judgment. The charges read aloud were staggering. Obstruction of justice, perjury, evidence tampering, coercion of witnesses, and the wrongful conviction of an innocent man. And that was just for Noah's case. As investigations unfolded, more cases emerged. Names, files, faces, all leading back to Monroe's desk, all showing the same patterns. Close the case fast, protect the narrative, and if the facts don't fit, fabricate them. Camille Dunn stood once again at the prosecution table, but this time not to defend, this time to destroy. She had traded her passion for innocence into an unrelenting fire for justice. And as she stood, presenting exhibit after exhibit of Monroe's carefully hidden corruption, the courtroom felt like a storm-gathering force. "Detective Monroe," Camille said, voice sharp as a blade, "used his badge not to serve, but to dominate. He manufactured guilt and buried truth. And for what? Career advancement. A reputation built on the broken backs of innocent men?" Monroe shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. She continued, her voice rising. "He was not just a rogue cop. He was a system unto himself, untouchable, unaccountable. Until now." The gallery listened in stunned silence. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras clicked like gunfire, and several of Monroe's former colleagues, now sitting in uniform on courtroom benches, refused to meet his eyes. Then came the testimonies. A mother took the stand, voice trembling, describing how Monroe coerced her teenage son into signing a false confession. Another man recounted the night Monroe planted drugs in his car after he refused to become an informant. One after another, victims poured into the light like long-buried ghosts, each word a dagger to Monroe's already decimated reputation. And then finally Noah took the stand. The room fell dead silent. Noah stood tall, not as a victim, but as a man who had survived the fire and emerged tempered. His voice was calm, but every syllable thundered with gravity. "I lost everything because of him," Noah said, never looking away from Monroe. "My freedom, my family, my name. He stole years from me that I can never get back." Monroe shifted again, but this time his composure fractured. He blinked furiously, jaw tight, nostrils flaring. "But what he didn't steal," Noah continued, "was my will, my hope, my soul. He tried, believe me, but I refused to let him win. And now he's the one sitting in that chair." Noah turned to the jury. "Don't give him what he gave me. Don't give him leniency. Give him the truth, the punishment, the weight of every life he shattered." When Noah stepped down, the courtroom didn't cheer. It was too solemn for that. but a wave of something powerful rippled through the air. Vindication, resolve. Then it was Monroe's turn to speak. He stood slowly, hands trembling, lips dry. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, "I was just trying to do my job. That's all I ever wanted." Camille rose. "Your job was to protect, not to destroy." Judge Whitaker leaned forward. "Mr. Monroe, this court has heard enough." The sentencing came quickly. "For the crimes committed against Noah Reed and others like him," Judge Whitaker declared, her voice firm, "and for the flagrant abuse of power entrusted to you by the state, this court sentences you to 35 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole." A stunned silence swept the room. Monroe's face crumpled. He had never imagined a world where he would face consequences. He had lived above the law, above scrutiny, above doubt. But now, shackled and broken, he would be known not as the man who closed cases, but as the one who built his empire on innocent lives and fell beneath the weight of the truth. As guards led him away, he glanced once, just once, at Noah. Noah didn't flinch. He just watched. The doors closed behind Monroe with a loud final clang. It was not just the end of a man, it was the end of an era of silence and the beginning of justice long overdue. The courthouse corridor echoed quietly, its usual chaos replaced by an eerie stillness. Noah Reed walked slowly toward the chambers, the polished marble floor beneath his feet feeling surreal, almost unreal. The memories he carried from these halls had once been tainted by pain, injustice, and helplessness, but today he would reclaim them. Judge Laura Whitaker's chamber door stood slightly ajar. Noah hesitated for a brief moment, then pushed it open. There she sat, the woman who had delivered the crushing blow that had stolen his life from him 10 years earlier. Whitaker was hunched at her desk, hands clasped tightly, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen from tears she'd been shedding quietly. "Noah," she whispered shakily, rising from her seat. Her voice was frail, a fragile echo of the authoritative judge who had once dismissed him so swiftly, condemning him without ever truly seeing him. She took a tentative step forward, guilt and remorse shadowing her movements. I don't know how to begin." "Then let me start," Noah responded softly, yet firmly, stepping further into the room. 10 years. That's how long I spent trapped behind bars for a crime I didn't commit. You took a decade of my life with barely a glance at the evidence, blinded by assumptions and biases. His voice trembled, but remained controlled. He saw her flinch slightly under the truth, her shoulders quivering beneath the invisible burden. Whitaker's voice cracked, desperation and regret pouring through. "I failed you, Noah. I failed the very principles I once swore to uphold. There's no excuse I can offer, no apology strong enough to erase the injustice I've inflicted." She covered her mouth with a shaking hand, tears falling freely down her cheeks. Her knees buckled slightly, forcing her to grip the desk for balance. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, and yet I must ask for it, not just for you, but for myself, for my own conscience." Noah watched the once powerful judge crumble before him, her authority stripped away, replaced by raw human vulnerability. The anger and bitterness he had once carried burned quietly within his chest, but beneath that fire was something deeper, something stronger, a realization born of suffering. Slowly, deliberately, Noah took another step closer, holding Whitaker's gaze with his own resolute stare. "I forgive you," he said clearly, unwavering. Whitaker's breath caught in surprise, her expression one of disbelief mixed with relief. "You forgive me?" "I forgive you," Noah repeated firmly, "not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to be free from the hatred that almost consumed me. Your apology means less to me than my own freedom. Freedom from bitterness, freedom from the chains of resentment that would have imprisoned me long after the cell doors opened." Whitaker sank into her chair, shaking as though a tremendous weight had finally released her from its grip. Noah's words resonated through the silence between them, powerful, healing, transformative. She wiped her tears slowly, nodding in stunned gratitude. As Noah turned and left her chamber, the bitter chains of resentment dropped away. He stepped into the hallway lighter, stronger, finally liberated, not by any court's ruling, but by the force of his own forgiveness. In the weeks and months that followed, Noah partnered with Camille Dunn, his lawyer who had fiercely defended him and exposed the tangled web of deceit that nearly destroyed his life. Together, they poured their energies into a new mission, creating a haven for those wrongfully convicted, aptly named Unframed. Their small headquarters began humbly, a modest office above an old warehouse downtown, cluttered with case files, handwritten notes, and endless cups of late-night coffee. But soon their mission grew. Every day, letters poured in from prisoners across the country, pleading for help, for someone to listen, someone to fight for them. Noah and Camille worked tirelessly, uncovering overlooked evidence, exposing systemic corruption, tearing down unjust verdicts brick by brick. And with every prisoner freed, the organization's reputation soared. Unframed became synonymous with justice, a beacon of hope against the darkness of wrongful convictions. But Noah understood that release from prison was just the first step. Real freedom required more. He began programs designed to help exonerated individuals re-enter society, teaching them skills and trades, carpentry, plumbing, mechanics, offering dignity, purpose, and independence after years stolen by the system. Many former prisoners learned to rebuild their lives with Noah's guidance, empowered by the same resilience and determination that had saved him. Noah's voice reached beyond prison walls. He launched a blog sharing his experiences, raw and honest accounts of survival, resilience, and redemption. People from around the globe resonated with his stories, fueling a powerful dialogue about justice, fairness, and accountability. Soon, the site attracted thousands of visitors daily, victims of injustice, passionate advocates, curious readers, all unified by the belief that change was not only necessary, but possible. After years of tireless advocacy, Noah stood once again beneath blinding lights, this time not in a courtroom, but upon a vast stage before hundreds of captivated faces. The auditorium brimmed with energy, whispers of admiration and respect cascading through the audience, silence instantly as Noah stepped forward. "My name is Noah Reed," he began, his voice deep, steady, commanding the attention of every soul in attendance. 10 years of my life were stolen by lies, prejudice, and indifference. 10 years lost because justice turned a blind eye, because a badge was abused, because a system valued convenience over truth. The auditorium was still, every breath held tightly, every heartbeat synchronized with his words. But today I stand before you not as a victim, but as proof that resilience and truth can outlast even the darkest injustice. Detective Alan Monroe took 10 years of my life, but I refuse to surrender one more second. Instead, I will spend every remaining moment fighting to ensure that what happened to me never happens to another human being. He paused, eyes blazing with passionate determination. Tonight marks the beginning, not an end. My organization, Unframed, will continue battling wrongful convictions, shining a relentless light on corruption and prejudice. Together, we will confront this system, demand accountability, and bring justice back to its rightful place. The crowd erupted into applause, electrified by his resolve. Noah's eyes scanned the faces before him, feeling the support and strength they offered. His son Marcus sat proudly in the front row, tears gleaming with pride. Camille stood beside the stage, her face radiating confidence, her tireless dedication unwavering. As the applause subsided, Noah leaned forward slightly, voice dropping to an intimate yet powerful whisper. "They took 10 years from me," he repeated solemnly. 10 years I can never reclaim, but hear me clearly. I will dedicate the next 50 years, or however long I have left, making sure they never take a single year from anyone else again. Silence lingered only briefly before the room exploded once more, into thunderous applause and cheers, a collective roar shaking the very foundations of injustice itself. Noah stood strong upon that stage, the echoes of his words resonating deeply within every heart present. As he stepped back from the microphone, he felt the powerful certainty of a life redeemed, not merely through justice served, but through hope restored and purpose rediscovered. Noah Reed had survived, he had overcome, and now finally free, He would dedicate his life to ensuring that justice would never again be blind. In the end, Noah Reed's story was never just about one man wrongfully imprisoned. It was a mirror held up to a system built on fragile foundations, a chilling reminder that justice isn't automatic. It must be demanded, fought for, and defended with relentless courage. His journey exposed how power, when unchecked, can warp truth into weaponry, and how silence, whether from judges, officers, or institutions, can become its own form of violence. But amid the injustice, amid the years lost in the soul-crushing weight of a sentence built on lies, Noah's story delivered a deeper, more profound lesson. That forgiveness is not weakness, it's the final act of defiance. This was a man who had every right to hate, a man whose life was ripped away, who sat in a cell while his son grew up without him, whose name became a whispered cautionary tale instead of a badge of honor. He endured beatings, betrayal, and abandonment. The world wrote him off. And yet, when finally given the chance to lash out, to condemn those who had buried him alive, Noah chose something far more radical. He forgave, not because the people who wronged him were worthy, but because hate is a second prison. Because freedom means more than walking out of a cell. It means walking without chains in your heart. This story forces us to ask hard questions. How many innocent voices cry out unheard? How many Monroe-like figures are still manipulating truths behind polished badges? And how often do we, as a society, look away, trusting the system simply because it's easier than questioning it? But Noah's journey offers hope as much as it offers warning. Through his pain, he built purpose. He didn't just escape injustice, he transformed it. With Unframed, he turned his suffering into a platform, giving voice to the voiceless, building a future where truth has armor and justice has accountability. This isn't a feel-good story with a clean bow tied at the end. It's a war story, and the battlefield is our courtrooms, our policies, our silence. But it's also a story of triumph, of how a man stripped of everything found the strength to rise, not with vengeance, but with vision. If there's one lesson this story carves into our conscience, it's this. Injustice may steal years, but integrity, resilience, and truth can outlast any sentence. And in a world quick to judge, slow to listen, and reluctant to change, heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear handcuffs, walk out of prison, and teach us what freedom truly means. If Noah's pain and unbreakable spirit moved you, don't let his story end here. Leave a comment, share this video, and hit that subscribe button. Your voice matters. Your action could be the spark that brings justice to someone still trapped in the dark. Every view, every share, every word spreads awareness and strengthens the fight against wrongful convictions. The next person saved could be because of you. Join us. Be part of the change. Because justice isn't just a courtroom decision. It's a movement, and it starts with you.